Good morning and welcome for the very first time to the Harvest Remedy Kitchen. My name is Christine and I love to get into seasonal baking and cooking and being able to share that with family and friends. And with Halloween coming up, today I'm going to show you how I make 5 of my family's favorite Halloween fun treats. First thing I need to do though is get a cup of tea to start the day. I always start my day with hibiscus tea, so let's go. Okay, now we can get started. So the first thing we're going to get started with today is making some sweet potato grain-free pastry, and I'm using a recipe that I found in this book, Life-Changing Foods by Jo Whitton and Fuad Kassab. And what I'll be doing is modifying the measurements a little bit. So I'm going to start by cooking my sweet potato in the oven. I've got it at around 200 degrees Celsius, which is 400 Fahrenheit, and I'm just going to cook it until really tender. Okay, so while our sweet potato is baking in the oven, we are going to make use of the oven being on, and we have to wait for the sweet potato to bake anyway. So I'm going to make the choc chip cookies that we're going to be using for our spider cookies. And I'm also going to make the Brookies that I'm going to use as part of our dirt cups. So we're going to start with a lined baking sheet. I've lined mine with an unbleached baking paper, which has silicone as its non-stick coating, as a lot of baking paper and non-stick products actually have PFOAs, those forever chemicals that never leave your body. So I'll put that to the side. And I'll have in the description the recipe for the spider cookies and also the recipe that I'm using for the Brookies that will sprinkle on top of the dirt cups. Now you'll notice that I'm using my Thermomix, which is just a fancy blender, as my KitchenAid mixer is broken at the moment. So you can use a mixer, you can use a blender, anything you have. You can even do it by hand if you like. So the first thing I'm going to add is the coconut oil. Okay, so I'm adding the coconut oil and an egg. And then I'm just going to mix that up until it's combined. Okay, so that just looks like that, just mixed up. Next thing I'm going to add is coconut sugar and vanilla. Now I use vanilla powder, and I just put in about 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla powder. Vanilla powder is a lot stronger than your vanilla paste or your vanilla essence, so you don't need much. I also love the gorgeous vanilla flecks. And then we're going to mix to combine that. So once it's been mixed for about 30 seconds, it just looks like that. I'm going to scrape down the sides. And then I'm going to add almond flour, coconut flour, baking powder. Now I make my own baking powder so that I can ensure it's gluten-free and also aluminium-free. It's a really simple recipe. It's bicarb soda with some cream of tartar, and then I add some tapioca flour so that it doesn't clump together. I'll add that recipe in the description for you also. And then we just need to add some salt. And then we're going to mix that again for about 20 seconds, just until combined. And then that's what it looks like. So this biscuit base can be used for lots of different types of biscuits. I'm going to add choc chips in here. I'm just using some 70% dark chocolate chips, but you could also change it up. You could add lemon, you could add spices in it, you could add some sultanas or cranberries, whatever you'd like to mix up your cookies. You could even add some nuts. And I'm just going to stir those chocolate chips through just so they don't break up too much. And once you've got that all incorporated, now we're just going to pop that on our cookie sheet. So you can use a spoon to pop these on the tray, or you could use your hands if you wanted to. I'm going to use a cookie scoop. So we were able to get 13 cookies out of that batch. Now I just want to flatten out these cookies a little bit. So I'm just going to grab a piece of baking paper and another baking sheet, and then just lightly press until they're about 1 centimetre thick, and then they just need to bake in the oven for approximately 12 minutes. Okay, so we've got our cookies out for our spider cookies, and we can finish those off later. I'll show you what they look like inside. Now we're going to get started on our Brookies, and this is so easy and so quick to make, and we're going to be crumbling these once they've cooled over the top of our basically chocolate pudding to make our dirt cups. And I'm just going to reuse the bowl, so you can reuse your mixer bowl or your blender bowl. It doesn't matter for this recipe, and I'll show you how quick and easy this recipe is. So firstly, I'm going to start by placing chocolate and coconut oil in the microwave for a minute. You could also do this on the stovetop if you wanted to, just on a double boiler. That's not a problem. You're basically just wanting to melt the chocolate and the oil together. So while that's going in the microwave, I have a prepared cookie sheet which I've lined, and then I'm just going to pop all the other ingredients in the blender. So we've got coconut sugar, tapioca sugar, we've got 2 eggs, we've got some baking powder, just half a teaspoon. We've got some salt. And also some vanilla powder. And it's as easy and quick as that. So after stirring, mine's not quite melted. So I'm just going to pop it back in at 10-second intervals until it's melted. Just giving it a stir after each time. So now that that's all melted, I'm just going to add that into the bowl with the other ingredients. And then I'm just going to mix for approximately a minute or just until everything's combined. Now the Brookie mixture is quite soft, so don't worry, it'll turn out just fine. Now my sweet potatoes cooked, I need to peel them ready for the pastry. Now you'll see here the skin peels right off. It's so easy to remove. You can use regular potatoes with this recipe as well. You might just need to reduce the amount of tapioca flour that you add. A sweet potato has a higher moisture content than standard white potatoes. So then once the potato mixture is in the mixing bowl, I'm just going to add the eggs. And some olive oil. I'm so sorry, we've skipped ahead a little bit as I thought I was filming and I wasn't. So what I've done is to this large bowl, added almond flour, tapioca and salt, and then just whisked it together to combine. And then the blended potato, eggs and olive oil, I've just added into there and then stirred it around with a spatula, or you could use a spoon until it pretty much comes together. And then what I'm going to do is just turn it out onto some baking paper on the bench, or you could use just a bench if you'd like. I like to do it on baking paper. I like using the baking paper to help combine the dough together. And I've also made a double batch here of this dough as I needed it for the cherry horror pie and also the mummy dogs, which I think will be delicious. But when I make pastry, I always make extra so I can have some in the fridge or freezer to save time for the next time that I need it. So before I roll the dough, I also like to have chilled it in the fridge for at least 20 minutes. And this tends to make it a lot easier to roll out as it's not too soft then. And I find when I put it in the fridge, if I flatten it into a disc shape, it does make it a lot easier to roll out once it's come out. It's starting to get a little bit dark now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back tomorrow and film the rest of our cooking then. Good morning. So it is the next morning now and we are back in the kitchen. So we made yesterday our spider cookie base, the chocolate chip cookies and the Brookies, and our sweet potato and almond pastry. And today for our spooky Halloween treats, we need to get the dirt cups components finished off. So we need the chocolate pudding made, the gummy worms, and we also need to do the cherry pie filling, and then we'll be able to bring everything together and assemble our 5 Halloween spooky treats. So the chocolate pudding and the gummy worms for the dirt cups, I'm getting the recipes from the Celebrations book by Danielle Walker. I'll also put in the description a link for when Danielle Walker actually made this recipe so that you can see her make it as well if you would like to. And this recipe, I'm using coconut milk. It's dairy-free and gluten-free, but you could use any milk that you like. You could use an almond milk, cashew milk. You could even use just normal milk if you prefer that. It's basically just making a chocolate pudding. So to make this pudding, we just need to add 1/4 cup of whatever milk you're using. And as I said, I'm using coconut milk. And what we're going to do first is bloom our gelatin. I'm going to add 2.5 teaspoons of unflavored gelatin. Now I use a grass-fed, grass-finished natural gelatin. Gelatin has amazing benefits for your gut lining, your digestive system, and also for your immune system. So I'm just going to sprinkle on evenly the 2.5 teaspoons. And then let that bloom. And while we're waiting for the gelatin to bloom, we're going to head over to the stovetop and heat up the milk, vanilla, and cacao powder. Okay, so to the saucepan, I'm going to add 2 cups of coconut milk. I'm going to add half a cup of pure maple syrup, a quarter of a cup of cacao powder, and I'm using half a teaspoon of vanilla powder. But if you're using vanilla extract, I would use 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Some salt, pinch of salt. So just stir this until combined, and we're just wanting to heat it until just before it's boiling. We're just getting it hot enough so that it will dissolve the gelatin mixture. Okay, so now our chocolate pudding and milk mixture is heated. We're just going to slowly add that and whisk that into our bloomed gelatin. Just adding a little bit at the start, just so you reduce the risk of lumps. And then keep whisking, and you can add the rest in pretty quickly. And then we have a beautiful smooth pudding mixture. Now, if you prefer a different pudding flavour, you can just omit the cacao powder and you can just leave it vanilla if you like, or you can add some fruit puree into it to make it a fruit flavoured pudding. That would be really nice too. All right, the next thing we need to do with this is just pour it into some cups and refrigerate it for 4 to 6 hours, and it'll be ready to go. Okay, so I'm just going to pour my chocolate pudding mix into a jug just to make it easier to pour into my little cups. And there's about 2 cups worth there, or 500 mils. And I'm just going to use these little cups that I got from a hospitality supplier. They're little biodegradable cups that are clear. I think that will look really cool, that you'll be able to see the chocolate pudding and the Brookies crumbled up on top with the worms through the plastic cup. Well, not plastic, through the little biodegradable cups. So at this point in the recipe, I was supposed to refrigerate the chocolate pudding, and then once set, whisk it or beat it with some beaters to aerate it to make it a bit lighter and more like a mousse. And it would have stretched a little bit farther than just the 7 cups as well. But it still turned out delicious. It was just a lot richer and a lot thicker. What we're going to do is just pop these into the fridge. And because these little cups are small, they won't take long. So they'll probably only take 4 hours to set. So we're going to make the gummy worms now, and these are quick and easy to do, and you can do so many different flavors by just changing out the juice that you're using. You can also use pureed fruit to flavor your gummies as well. So as with the pudding, we're just going to bloom some gelatin. So I'm going to start with the juice. I'm making a pomegranate gummy worm. This is just some wild organic pomegranate juice. And so to the bowl, we're just going to add half a cup of that. And then we're going to add 3 tablespoons. Now these are American tablespoons. This is an American recipe, which means that a tablespoon is 15 mils, which is 3 teaspoons. The Australian tablespoon is equivalent to 4 teaspoons, so 20 mils, but we're using 15 mil tablespoon for this recipe. So you need 3 15 mil tablespoons. And we're just going to sprinkle that over so that it doesn't clump. Okay, so to my saucepan, I'm going to add the rest of the pomegranate juice. So we needed 2 cups in total, and I used a half of the gelatin. So I just need another cup and a half of the pomegranate. And I think the pomegranate tartness is going to add such a beautiful contrast to the sweet dirt cups. And the color's amazing, very Halloween-y. A tablespoon of the lemon juice that we squeezed this morning. little bit too much. You could strain it if you want, but I'm not going to worry. Now you don't have to add a sweetener if you don't want to. I'm using a little bit of honey that I source locally because pomegranate juice is a little bit tart. But if you're using something sweeter like an apple juice or a pureed mango, you might not want to add any more sweetness to that. It's totally up to you. But for the pomegranate juice, I'm going to add some honey, this beautiful local honey. And we just want to bring that up to almost boiling. And we're just going to stir that to dissolve the honey. So once your juice mixture is nice and hot, you just want to slowly add it to the gelatin at first until the gelatin dissolves, and then once that's dissolved you can add the rest in quite quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to pour this into a smaller jug just so it's easier to pour in the gummy worm molds. So here I've got my cute little gummy worm molds and I'm just going to attempt to pour this into these molds. Oops. I think these molds did come with a little syringe that you could use. However, I'm not sure where that is. Oh gosh. I'm making an absolute mess here. We are making it work. The last component that we need to make today is the cherry pie filling, and then we'll be able to bring everything together. So what I've got here is 3 tins, 425 gram tins of black pitted cherries. I'm using a sweet cherry, not a sour cherry. So I'm just going to add that to a medium bowl, and I've just drained that just in a sieve. Now you could use fresh cherries, frozen cherries. You can use the sour cherries if you prefer those as well. You can also change the fruit that you're using if you want to. This recipe is adaptable to whatever fruit that you're using. Just use the same amounts of fruit. So it's roughly about 4.5 cups of fruit. As I said, I used 3 tins drained of the cherries. So I've got my 4.5 cups of cherries in my bowl. And to that, I'm going to add some coconut sugar. Now I do prefer to use coconut sugar as opposed to processed sugar, as it's full of nutrients and it also has a lower GI than regular sugar, so it's not going to spike your blood sugar levels as a normal processed white sugar will. So you can add it to taste and preference. I'm going to add in about 1/2 cup. And it depends what fruit you use as well. If your fruit is more tart, you can add a little bit more sweetener. Whereas if you've got really sweet fruit, you won't need to add as much of the sugar or the sweetener that you're using. I'm also going to add in about 1/4 cup of tapioca flour just to thicken the filling. Now you could use cornstarch if you like. Whatever you've got on hand. The spices that I'm going to add today are vanilla and cardamom. So I'm going to add about 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla and 1/4 teaspoon of cardamom. But you can use whatever spices you like. If you like cinnamon or nutmeg or allspice, you can add that in as well. And I'm going to add just a pinch of salt, as that really brings out the vanilla flavour. And I'm also going to add in a tablespoon of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And then we're going to mix that up so that all of that tapioca flour coats the cherries or whatever fruit that you're using. I think the cherries are going to give a great look to this monster face that we're doing for Halloween. But you just want to combine everything in the bowl, and then we'll just put that in the fridge until we're ready to go. So the next thing we need to get going is rolling out our pastry for our cherry pie and also our mummy dog. And we need to preset the oven at 200 degrees Celsius or 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So to get started with the cherry pie, I've got my pie dish. I'm just going to grease that with some olive oil. then what I'm going to do is roll out my pastry. So the rolling pin I'm using has a little measuring guide on the side, which is set to 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch, but you could just use any standard rolling pin. And I'm going to use some grease-proof paper to roll my pastry between. The reason that I don't flour my bench top and roll it out is I don't want to add too much flour back into my dough. So I've had this pastry out of the fridge that we made yesterday for about half an hour, just so it's a little bit easier to roll, otherwise it can be quite hard. Remember yesterday we divided our doubled dough mixture into 4 before placing it in the fridge. So this fourth, I'll only need about half for the bottom of the pie and half for the top of the pie. And you can see it's beautiful and soft. So we're just going to place that second piece of greaseproof paper on top and then start rolling. So you're just wanting to get this as best you can into the size you need for the base of the pie. So I need a little bit more. And I find that if after every third or fourth roll, I release the greaseproof paper from the pastry, it rolls a lot easier. Okay, so now we've got our pastry rolled out and it's going to fit the pie dish. I just bring the pie dish over and then flip it on top and then gently push it in before I take the paper off and gently peel away the paper. And it doesn't matter if you crack your pastry or break your pastry a little bit, you can always just push it back together. And then push it into the sides so that it gets this beautiful crimping pattern on the edge as well. And then I'm just going to grab a knife and just cut off the edges. And it's that easy. If you want, you can fill in these edges with the pastry that was just cut off. It's as easy as just pushing it back in. And cutting that off again. Now you can see there's a couple of little air bubbles there. What I'm going to do is just grab a fork and prick and just release the air a little bit. So I'm just going to add a piece of parchment paper on top just so it doesn't brown too much. And then we're going to blind bake this and pop this in the oven for about 10 minutes. So I'm just rolling out the top portion now. And then my 16-year-old is going to carve a super spooky face onto this. So I set my timer and it went off, and then I left it in the oven and didn't get it out. So it did burn a little bit on the edges, but that will still be fine. I've just popped it on this oven tray just in case the filling leaks. I don't want it going all over my oven. So I'm going to add the cherry filling in now. And there's our beautiful cherry filling in there. I'm just going to wipe off the spilt egg because that will cook on my baking tray and be very hard to get off. So now that my 16-year-old has done an amazing job at the spooky face, we're going to put the top of this pie on, and I'm just going to use some spare greaseproof paper, and I'm going to flip it over on the reverse, hopefully without destroying it. Oh my gosh, this is the terrifying part. Okay. And then I'm going to carefully put it on top of the pie, hopefully without breaking it. I wouldn't call that a success, but not a complete disaster either. And press it all down. And then we're going to add some more teeth and give it an egg wash, and then that's ready to go in the oven. Okay, so we have the teeth on and we're ready to go. I'm just going to pop it on a tray, baking tray, in the oven, and I'm going to cook that for about 10 minutes, and then I'm going to check it and then put it on for another 5 if it needs it. And while we've got the oven on for the cherry pie, why not make use of it and cook our mummy dogs at the same time? All right, so I've rolled another piece of our pastry dough, and what I need to do with this pastry dough is cut it into strips. So I've just rolled a rectangle. So hot dogs notoriously have a lot of additives in them, and you never really know what's been used to make them. So the Cleaver's organic hot dogs that I buy, it's beef and herbs and spices, some rosemary extract, and that's it. So I feel really great giving this to my family and also eating it myself. Okay, so now we've got our hot dogs chopped in half. All we need to do is make strips, thin strips, about 1 centimetre each, out of this pastry. And they don't have to be perfectly even strips either. It doesn't really matter for this. So making these mummy dogs is really easy. All you do is take your piece of pastry and just wind your little hot dog. I normally do it about 2/3, 3/4 the way up the little hot dog, and wind it back down, break it off, press it gently, and then make a little beanie. And then you have it. And then I add peppercorns into this for the eyes. So I just make a couple of incisions with a sharp knife. And just take some peppercorns and push them in. There you go. I've got all my mummy dogs done. They're ready to go in the oven now with the cherry pie. So now that our mummy dogs and our cherry pie are out of the oven, I'm going to get started on our strawberry ghosts, and they're super simple. I've got 200 grams of white chocolate here. I'm going to melt it in the microwave. You can use a double boiler if you like. I just find the microwave so simple to melt chocolate. So I'm going to pop it in for a minute and then 10-second intervals thereafter if it hasn't melted yet. So while we're waiting for our chocolate to melt in the microwave, I've got ready some baking paper. I've got 2 punnets of strawberries, and I've also got some dark chopped chips. Perfect, so our white chocolate is melted. Now, when I'm dipping strawberries, I find having a bowl with some boiling water and sitting the chocolate bowl on top just keeps the chocolate a really nice consistency for dipping those strawberries into. Now, the strawberries I would do on the day that you're going to eat them. Otherwise, the strawberries can sweat and it makes the chocolate go a little bit funny. So let's get started. I'll show you how simple and easy these ghosts are to make. So we're just dipping our strawberry in the chocolate. And then I just take the choc chips, and before it dries, I add the eyes on, and I also add a little mouth. And I'll lift it up. There you go. And I think they look super cute for something so easy and simple to make. I'll just get the rest of these done. And just look how cute these little ghosts are. And they only took about 2 minutes to make. So I'm just heating a little bit of dark chocolate up in the microwave, and we're going to use that for the spider cookies to make the spider cookie legs. Oh, it's just gone off. But before I go and grab that, the Brookies that we made yesterday, I'm just going to pop them in my Thermomix just to break them up into a crumble. Now, you could put your Brookies into a food processor and just use the turbo function. You could even just use your fingers if you want to, that's not a problem. This is what our Brookie crumbs look like for our dirt cups, but first we'll be making our spider cookies. Okay, so for the spider cookies, we're using the chocolate chip cookies that we made yesterday, and I've just melted some chocolate in the microwave and popped it into a piping bag. Now, if you don't have a piping bag, you can just use a Ziploc bag as well. That's not a problem at all. And then I just snip off the end of the piping bag, like so, making sure I know where that little plastic bit is. And then I'm gonna pipe all of the little legs on our spider cookies, and I start from the center and just do 4 on each side, and I go back and forward. It does take me a couple to get into the groove again, so don't worry too much. And I normally put a bit of an angle on them, so I go back first and then come forward. I probably should have practiced these a little bit before I started filming. Okay, so now we've got all the spider legs done. We're just using some chocolate ganache that was left over from the Halloween cupcakes my 16-year-old made. To make this ganache, all we did was add 200 grams of dark chocolate with 200 grams of cream, melted it in the microwave until it was combined and fully melted. Now, you could also use milk chocolate if you wanted to. And now, if you're using milk chocolate, the ratios are a little bit different to chocolate and cream. You would use 3/4 of milk chocolate to 1/4 of cream. You could also buy ganache or chocolate buttercream if you didn't want to make it yourself. And last year for these spider cookies, we used choc-coated freeze-dried raspberries, and they worked really well as well. What I'm going to do with this ganache is I'm just going to take a little spoonful and just make it with 2 teaspoons into a little round body shape, and then I'm going to add it to the spider cookie. And then I'm going to make one a little bit smaller for the head. And that's it. That's your spider cookie done. So I'm just gonna get going on the rest of these cookies to finish them off. And here's our spider cookies. I think they look pretty cute. Look how cute they look. The last thing that we have to put together is our dirt cups. So I've taken the chocolate puddings out of the fridge. So they were in the fridge about 4 hours today, and they have set absolutely perfectly. And we've got our Brookies that we blitzed up in the blender. And I also have my gummy worms. Now I was probably a little bit impatient with the gummy worms, and I could have left them in the mold longer, as I had a lot of trouble getting them out of the mold, and I'm very glad that I did not film that. So we have basically some whole worms, but pretty much worm guts to spread onto our dirt cups. So this is how quick and easy our dirt cups come together. We've got our little chocolate pudding. We take our broken up, blended up Brookies, sprinkle some on top, as much or as little as you like. And then we've got our little gummy worms that we're going to lay on top of the dirt. And I'll put a couple of those on, and there you have it, our beautiful little dirt cup. Once I finish these dirt cups, I'll be able to put our 5 spooky gluten-free Halloween treats together. And then the best part, we can have a taste test. These treats could also be made dairy-free really easily by using a dairy-free chocolate. Now, although the flavour of this pie was really good, we weren't that happy with the filling. It was quite runny, it didn't set, so I think I would try a different recipe for next time. So my 16-year-old is currently trying the Halloween treats. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Big thumbs up. Lloyd, would you like to try some Halloween treats? He does, so he's going to try some Halloween treats. He's going for the mummy dogs. So let's see what he thinks about the mummy dogs. They've got peppercorns for eyes, just be careful. I'm going to start with the dirt cup first. Make sure I get a little bit of everything. Okay. That is so good. The rich chocolate smooth pudding paired with the creamy, almost fudgy Brookie crumb and that sour pomegranate gummy worm is just delicious. Plus the Brookies had a little bit of salt in them, and it just gives that whole dirt cup a lift. I think this is going to be my favorite. Okay, here's our choc chip cookies with the ganache spiders. They're good too. Now, I'm going to try one of our cute mummy dogs. I think anyone who tries these treats are going to just love them. The best part about these is they're gluten-free, they're made with whole foods, and so you don't have to feel guilty about indulging a little over Halloween. So if you try any of these recipes, let me know down in the comments, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.